March 2022, Chicago. And Braden's one single sentence stopped everyone in the room cold. These sneakers are fake. The room is Heritage Collectibles' second floor. Oak hardwood floors, framed jerseys lining the walls, legends sitting quietly inside glass display cases. People bring their treasures here, the most valuable pieces of their lives. And this morning, Aaliyah had brought hers. 28 years old, black blazer, straight-cut pants, hair pulled back, light purple circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept well. In her hands, a yellow cardboard box with worn edges and strips of old tape across the top. The kind that feels light but carries heavy. Sitting across the table, Braden Morrison, mid-40s, a suit, thick-framed glasses, Heritage's head authentication expert, 8 years of experience, hundreds of evaluations, a respected name in the industry. Hands professional, movements measured. He leaned over the table like a surgeon. He opened the box and pulled out the sneakers inside. Nike Air Jordan 6, red and black. Worn soles, a thin scratch along the right side panel, and on the side of the left shoe, a signature in black pen. Michael Jordan. A date written next to it, June 12th, 1991. Braden pulled out his UV light and magnifier, a reference file, a catalog built up over years, documenting the most distinctive features of Jordan's known signatures. The room was quiet, a dozen collectors spread across the evaluation tables, each busy with their own business. But glances kept drifting this way. Braden examined it for 3 minutes, maybe 4. Then he set the sneakers back down, took off his glasses, wiped the lenses, put them back on, and laughed. Softly, almost politely. But that softly, what lived inside that laugh, landed in Aaliyah's stomach like a fist. "Miss Carter," he said, voice flat, professional. "I've been doing this for 8 years, and I need to be honest with you." Aaliyah's hands clasped together under the table. "This signature isn't original. The pressure texture doesn't match Jordan's known handwriting profile. And this model," a brief pause, "is not the game shoe associated with the 1991 NBA Finals. The date notation also appears non-standard." "My father was there," said Aaliyah. Her voice was tight but steady. "He was on the Chicago Bulls staff. He was in the equipment crew. He was in Inglewood that night." "I understand." Braden stretched the word out in that convenient way. "I understand." A polite but final door, used to shut everything down. We get stories like this all the time, but we look at documentation and physical evidence. And here, he glanced at the sneakers, that criteria isn't being met. The room heard that. It really did. A collector looked up. Someone whispered. Someone else pulled out their phone. And Aaliyah, carrying the sneakers her father hadn't let anyone touch for 31 years, hadn't shown to guests, had only taken down from the top shelf on rare, quiet evenings, holding them in his hands and saying, "This is the most valuable thing I own in this world," felt something inside her collapse without a sound. It wasn't shame. That wasn't the name for what she felt. It was an injustice done to her father. Braden closed the box, politely, but the sound of it closing was final. "I'm sorry, we can't take this piece to auction." Aaliyah stood up, picked up the box, turned around. Nobody said a word. Her shoulders dropped just a little more as she walked out the door. But if you think the story ends here, you'd be wrong. Because exactly 2 weeks later, someone was going to walk into Heritage Collectibles' marble-floored room, and nobody in that room was going to be ready for it. But before we get to that moment, we need to go back first. Because to understand this story, you need to understand one night. The night this whole thing was born. And there's a man. You need to know who he was. June 12th, 1991. That night, that hallway. The Chicago Bulls that year were stacked with stars. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Phil Jackson's triangle offense. But there was no ring on anyone's finger yet. 1989, the Pistons. 1990, the Pistons again. Headlines like, "Jordan is great, but great enough to win a championship," kept showing up in the papers. And Jordan heard every one of them. In every interview, every morning, after every peak night. And then 1991 came, the finals. Chicago Bulls versus the Los Angeles Lakers. A massive matchup. Magic Johnson's Lakers against Jordan's Bulls. Generations colliding. Two completely different basketball philosophies. 4-1, Bulls. That game, Jordan dropped 30 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds. Pippen carried the team with 32. Final score, 108-101. And when the buzzer sounded, Jordan lifted the trophy, pressed it to his chest, and cried, on the floor, in front of everyone, without trying to hide it. Because emotions shouldn't be hidden, and that photograph became legendary. Jordan pressing the trophy to his chest, eyes closed, face wet. One of the most iconic images in the history of sports. But away from the floor, inside all the celebration and the chaos, in a hallway, in a spot nobody was watching, a small moment happened. And that moment is the heart of this story. Douglas Carter, 44 years old, part of the Chicago Bulls equipment and logistics crew. He'd been with the organization for 12 years, washing jerseys, handling equipment transport, organizing travel. He went on every road trip with the team. He was there for every playoff run. He was a behind-the-scenes man, and he was known throughout the staff for the deep admiration he had for Jordan. That night, he was in Inglewood, Great Western Forum. When the game ended, the locker room was pure chaos. Beer foam, screaming, music, tears. Phil Jackson was sitting quietly in a corner. Pippen had his arms around Horace Grant. The media had poured in. Cameras, microphones, lights everywhere. Douglas was in the hallway. He was organizing the equipment bags, finishing up the last tasks needed to close out the season. While everyone else was lost in the celebration, he was bent over, labeling trunks. A door opened. Jordan came out, white polo shirt. On his feet, the Air Jordan 6s he'd worn that night, red and black, soles worn down, confetti dust from the floor still fresh on them, a gym bag over his shoulder. Douglas stopped, gave a small nod. Jordan stopped too. That was rare. Everyone in that hallway that night was in motion, but Jordan stopped. Both of them were quiet for a moment, a long moment. Then Jordan laughed. That wide, tired, but completely real laugh of his. "You're always everywhere." "Douglas," he said. Douglas was caught off guard. He didn't know Jordan knew his name. "I'm always here in case you need anything," he said quietly. Jordan tilted his head, looked down, at his sneakers. He stood there for a moment, still. Something was turning over inside him. Maybe he felt the weight of the trophy again. Maybe in that hallway, seeing that quiet man, he'd understood something. That a championship doesn't only belong to the people on the floor. And yes, that mattered deeply. Being able to see the labor of the people behind the scenes, just as much as the people on the court, that was rare. And in that moment, Jordan had managed to do exactly that. Then he set his bag down on the floor, reached inside and pulled out a black pen. He crouched down. On the side panel of the left shoe, he wrote, "Michael Jordan, the 6th of December, 1991. Then he took off the sneakers, put on the backup pair from the bottom of his bag. That one pair of sneakers, sweaty, worn down, carrying every single second of that championship. He held them out to Douglas. "We made history tonight," Jordan said. "These are a witness to that history. Keep them." He was giving Douglas something more than a gift. He was honoring his invisible labor. Douglas couldn't say a word. He just took them. Jordan squeezed his shoulder and turned around, walked back into the noise of the celebration. Douglas looked down at the sneakers in his hands. He stood there for a long time. The hallway was starting to empty out, but he was still standing there. "Hey, hold on a second. We're getting swept up in the moment here." But understanding Douglas Carter requires more than just understanding that one night. To understand that man, you need to understand 12 years. He joined the Bulls organization in 1979. He was 22 years old. Equipment assistant, the very bottom rung. Folding towels, pumping up balls, packing travel bags. Low pay, long hours, zero applause. But in every city he went to, in every arena, he worked behind the scenes. And he never once complained. One time, during the playoff road trip in Jordan's first season with the Bulls, in 1985, the plane was about to take off early and an equipment trunk had been left at the terminal. Everyone panicked. Douglas quietly got up, drove back himself, loaded the trunk, and came in on the next commercial flight to deliver it. Nobody thanked him. It probably wasn't even noticed. Douglas didn't care, because he believed in that organization. He believed in that team. And Jordan, the Jordan of those early seasons, before he ever became a champion, he believed in deeply. His wife Marlene had asked him once, "Why do you work this hard? Nobody even sees you." Douglas had smiled and said, "I see myself. That's more than enough." Marlene had nodded. She understood, because that's who Douglas was. He didn't wait for approval. He didn't wait for applause. He loved his work, tried to do it as well as he could, and that was enough for him. And up until 1991, up until that big night, nothing had changed. But that night, the hallway changed. The sneakers Jordan handed him weren't just a gift to Douglas. They were a moment of being seen. Behind the scenes, without confetti and cameras, truly seen. And that feeling, no price tag can touch. When he got home to his small house in Chicago that night, Marlene was asleep. Douglas found a yellow cardboard box in the kitchen drawer. He carefully placed the sneakers inside, taped it shut, and put it on the very top shelf. He wrote a note, folded it, and put it inside, by hand, on an old piece of paper. These sneakers are from the night of June 12, 1991. Great Western Forum, Los Angeles. Michael Jordan gave them to me himself. Never sell them. But if the time comes, give them to the right place. And he never took them down. For years. People sometimes ask, why didn't he sell them? Why did he hold on to something worth millions of dollars for 30 years? The answer is simple. Because those sneakers weren't money to Douglas. They were proof of that moment. I was there. I was a part of this story too. Selling them, that would have been reducing that moment to a price. And Douglas could never do that. I need to stop here for a second. Douglas Carter is the hero of this story. But how many Douglases are out there in this world? How many people working quietly behind the scenes without anyone noticing? And how many times were we able to say to them, I see you. Look, this matters. It really does. If this story is making you think, hit the notification bell and subscribe. Your presence here is everything to me when it comes to being able to keep telling stories like this. I need to know you're here. Subscribe and share your stories in the comments so I can feel you there. Now let's pick the story back up right where we left off. Douglas Carter died in 2021, 62 years old, a heart attack, in his sleep. Aaliyah found the box 2 months after her father passed, while she was clearing out his house. Top of the shelf. Dusty, but the tape was still holding. She opened it, and what she saw stopped her cold. She cried. Once, just once, when Aaliyah was still a little girl, she had seen her father take that box down from the shelf, but he'd closed it right back up. These are private, he'd said, and nothing more after that. She read the note inside, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. There were her mother's care expenses, her younger siblings' college tuition, and the small debts her father had left behind. Nothing enormous, but the weight of it was real for Aaliyah. If the time comes, give them to the right place. That sentence rang in her head for 3 straight days. If the time comes, give them to the right place. She turned it over, thought about it for a long time. She wasn't sure whether the time had really come, but she started looking into it. There were 3 auction houses in Chicago that handled this kind of thing. One of them was far more prestigious than the others. Heritage Collectibles. The most valuable pieces in basketball history had passed through here. Signed jerseys, historic trophies, game-worn sneakers. Jordan's sneakers sold at Sotheby's in 2022 would reach $2.2 million. But Aaliyah didn't know that yet. She made an appointment, got herself ready. She brought the box. She brought the note her father had written by hand, and one photograph, her father in his Bulls staff uniform, standing in the locker room hallway, smiling. And she sat down across from Braden Morrison. This was Braden's job. Every day, someone came to this table, holding something they believed was a legend. And Braden knew that 80% of the time, it wasn't. That's a professional reality, the dark side of the collector's world. Fake jerseys, fake balls, fake signatures. One time, he'd evaluated a jersey someone claimed was from Jordan's 1998 finals. The tag was sewn in backwards. The paint on the number pointed to the wrong production period. The owner was completely sincere. It had come through an inheritance. They genuinely thought it was real, but it was fake. It's a professional deformation. It develops without you realizing. The more fakes you face, the lower the percentage in your mind that something might actually be real. And Braden that day, that morning, when he looked at Aaliyah, he had already built a frame in his mind without even knowing it. He pulled out the UV light, the magnifier, the reference file. He looked at the signature. Jordan's signatures from the 90s were recognizable. Fast, slightly slanted left, the J beginning with a distinctive curve. Some of the angles in this signature were different. But that difference was exactly what you'd expect from a signature written off-court, in a hallway, quickly, with a backup pen. Braden didn't think about that. He should have. But he didn't. And he said, "We can't take this piece to auction." Aaliyah picked up the box, turned around, walked. As she walked out the door, she thought to herself, "My father would never lie. Not ever. There has to be something else going on." Chloe Nguyen had watched the whole thing. 25 years old, 6 months into her internship at Heritage, thin-framed glasses, a notebook always nearby. She was studying law, but she'd chosen this job because she was curious about the collector's world. She didn't write anything in her notebook that day. She just watched the woman walk away, watched how she held the box, watched how her shoulders fell as she walked out the door. This wasn't just an object to her, she thought. Braden went back to his table, moved on to the next appointment. Everything was normal, but Chloe closed her notebook. Walking home that evening, she couldn't get that scene out of her head. After the rejection, Aaliyah didn't know what to do after that day. For the first 2 days, she didn't look at the box at all. She put it in the bottom drawer of the shelf, somewhere she couldn't see it. On the third day, she started reaching out to other auction houses. There were 2 reasonable options. One was smaller, but had a solid reputation. The other was an online platform, but this was a small industry. Word that Heritage turned it down had spread quietly. Nobody said it out loud, but the first auction house apologized about the appointment. "We're fully booked right now." The second one ignored her email for a few days, then sent a short rejection. The practical meaning was clear. Heritage had said fake. That was enough. One afternoon, Aaliyah sat in a cafe. She was on her laptop, researching 1991 NBA Finals records, roster lists, equipment staff, travel documents. The name Douglas Carter. It came up in a few old program brochures, in team photographs, in the back rows wearing a staff uniform, smiling. Aaliyah looked at that photograph for a long time. "See, Dad? I'm here." But nobody believes me. She closed the laptop screen. When she got home, she put the box back on the shelf. This time at the top, right where her father had always kept it, and she couldn't sleep that night. That same night, Chloe started digging. 1991 NBA Finals. Chicago Bulls equipment staff. Douglas Carter. LinkedIn. Former Bulls employees. Arena staff networks. She found a name, a retired Bulls arena coordinator who still had an active profile in Chicago. She sent a message, late at night, apologetic in tone, but direct. The reply came in the morning. "Douglas Carter? Yeah, I knew him. He was invaluable to that organization. For 12 years, he was one of the most trusted guys we had. He died in 2021? I didn't know that. I'm really sorry to hear it." Chloe stared at the screen. She closed her eyes, took a breath. Then she got up and walked to Braden's office. "Do you have a minute? About the piece we turned down last week?" Braden looked up. "The decision is final, Chloe." But the man was genuinely on the Bulls staff. I was able to verify it through social networks. I spoke with a former coordinator. "Chloe." The tone didn't rise, but there was a finality inside it. "In this business, every story looks real. We go by physical evidence. You know that, don't you?" Chloe stopped. "Yeah, I understand," was all she could get out. She turned around, but as she turned, she saved a number into her phone. Jordan Brand's Chicago office. I need to stop here for a second, because the moment Chloe saved that number is the quietest but most critical point in this entire story. Nobody sees this. Nobody says, "Good job." There's no job security here. If anything, there's risk, but she saved it. If this story is making you think, leave a comment and subscribe. Your presence here is everything to me when it comes to being able to keep telling stories like this. Let me know you're here by commenting and subscribing. Now let's pick the story back up where we left off. The call. Chloe didn't call that number. She couldn't. She didn't have the standing. A 6-month intern going around the head expert to call Jordan Brand directly. That would be the end of her. But she sent an email. Short, clear, measured. To Jordan Brand's Chicago office. "I work in the authentication department at Heritage Collectibles. I'd like to share some information regarding a piece brought to our auction last week. The piece was rejected. However, my own research suggests it may be genuine. Feel free to reach out if you'd like to talk." She sent it and waited. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. On the 4th day, that afternoon, an unknown number called. "Chloe Wynn? Yes? We're calling from Jordan's office. We received your email." That conversation lasted 12 minutes. Chloe told them everything. Aaliyah, the box, Braden's reaction, the silence in the room, her father's history with the Bulls staff, silence on the other end, then a voice. "What's the last name of the woman who brought in the piece?" "Carter. Aaliyah Carter." A long pause. "Is she Douglas Carter's daughter?" Chloe froze. "I think, yes." The voice on the phone took a deep breath. "Understood. Thank you." The line went dead. Michael Jordan remembers a lot of things. Not much is said about this, but everyone around him knows it. He remembers the people he's come across, their faces, their moments, the small gestures, especially the small gestures. And of course, he remembered Douglas Carter, that hallway, that night, while the confetti was still in the air, and that man was quietly working behind the scenes. "I'm always here in case you need anything." That line had stayed somewhere in Jordan's mind. Maybe he couldn't explain why, but it had stayed. And now that man was gone, and his daughter had been humiliated in the middle of a room. When Jordan called his office, he had one question: what do we know about Heritage Collectibles? The team put together a file in short order. Heritage's background, its prestige, the nature of the dispute, who Braden Morrison was. Jordan read through the pages, every single one. Then he looked at his team. "We could file a formal letter of objection," someone said. "There's also a legal route. Or a press statement." "No," said Jordan. Silence. "I'm going myself." The team didn't flinch. "Should we set up an appointment?" "No. No appointment." There was something behind that decision. Jordan knew what official channels meant. Letters, lawyers, press releases. All of those were tools that kept distance. They might bring an institution to its knees. But nobody in those letters would understand Douglas Carter's name, that hallway, that night. Only he could understand that, and only he could tell it, face to face, in that room, to those people. 2 weeks later, the last Friday of March 2022, Heritage Collectibles, morning hours. Braden came in early, got his coffee, opened his files. A routine day. Chloe was in the corner, a little tense, but quiet. She hadn't said a word to anyone. As the clock crept toward 11, there was a stir near the door. The assistant leaned in, a strange look on her face. Was it shock, fear, or both at once? Hard to tell. "Mr. Braden? What is it?" "Someone's here." "No appointment." Braden raised his eyebrows. "Who?" The assistant paused for half a second. "Michael Jordan." The room heard that. It really did. A collector stopped mid-sentence. An expert set his pen down on the table. Chloe leaned back against the wall, folded her hands in front of her, and took a slow, deep breath. Like something she'd been waiting for a long time was finally happening, and the door opened. Michael Jordan walked into Heritage Collectibles' second floor. Not a suit, simple. White polo shirt, dark pants. He had a baseball cap on, but he took it off at the door because he wasn't hiding from anyone. 58 years old, shoulders still broad, walk still deliberate, and those eyes hadn't changed one bit. Not the eyes he carried when he was hunting down opponents on the court. Something calmer, heavier. The eyes of a man who came here to set something right. He walked in, stopped, scanned the room, slowly, looked at every face, found Braden, and walked straight toward him. The entire room had frozen, completely, literally frozen. A collector was just standing there with a catalog in his hand. Someone said, "Oh my God." Barely a whisper, but everyone heard it. Jordan stopped in front of Braden. "Are you Braden Morrison?" Braden had heard, of course. He knew who this was. He'd told himself to stay calm, stay professional, but being face to face was something else. This kind of proximity was something else entirely. "Yes, sir," he said. Voice steady, but something trembling underneath it. Jordan waited 1 second. 2 weeks ago, there was a woman in this room. Aaliyah Carter. She brought in a pair of sneakers that belonged to her father. You turned her away. Braden opened his mouth. "Our authentication protocol." "I know your protocol," said Jordan. The tone didn't shift, didn't rise an inch, but the air in the room changed. "Those sneakers are from the night of June 12th, 1991. 1991 Finals, Game 5. Great Western Forum, Los Angeles. I wore them, and after the game, in the hallway while the confetti was still on the floor, I gave them to Douglas Carter." Silence. "I wrote on the side of the left shoe, black pen, my name and the date. That night. That hallway." Braden swallowed. "Sir, the signature analysis. Jordan repeated the two words, slowly, each one carrying weight. "An analysis is going to determine whether a signature I put down is genuine? Isn't me standing here telling you it's mine enough?" The room offered no answer. Someone coughed softly in the back, then stopped, like they wanted to take even that sound back. Braden opened his mouth to say something, but he couldn't, because he didn't know what to say. Jordan waited. Didn't rush him, just waited. And Braden, 8 years of experience, hundreds of pieces evaluated, a known name in the industry, couldn't say a single word. Jordan went on. His voice stayed the same, low and controlled, but every sentence was carried with care. "Douglas Carter spent 12 years with the Chicago Bulls organization, quietly. He was with us on every road trip, every playoff run. He washed jerseys, hauled trunks, organized travel. He was in Inglewood that night, because he loved his job. because he believed in the organization. He stopped, took a slow breath, looked at Braden and kept going. I remember that night. I was holding the trophy. The locker room was packed. And out in the hallway there was a man organizing equipment bags. Everyone else was celebrating, but he was working. That man's name was Douglas Carter. Braden's jaw tightened slightly. Now that man is gone. His daughter is here. And because of your decision, the most valuable memory her father ever had got stamped with the word fake. Without raising his voice a single degree, yet filling every corner of that room. That was wrong. Chloe, describing that moment later, would say, he never raised his voice. He never hit the table. He never threatened anyone. But that room, every single inch of that room, felt like it had frozen solid. If I said I forgot to breathe, I wouldn't be exaggerating. Braden Morrison got home at 4 o'clock that day. He sat down at his desk, took off his jacket, stared at the empty surface in front of him for a long time. He thought and thought and thought. First about what had happened today, then about the 8 years before it. Hundreds of pieces and hundreds of fakes. But this time it wasn't fake. This time, the proof was right there in front of his eyes. Michael Jordan had walked into that room, described that hallway, described that night. And as Braden listened, he understood. The reason that signature looked a little different was exactly what you'd expect from a signature written not on a court, but in a hallway, with a backup pen pulled from a bag, written quickly, in the moment. That's when he got it. I should have thought about that, he said to himself, but I didn't. Because battling fakes every single day changes you at some point. You start assuming that even the truth needs to earn its skepticism first. And that assumption, on that day, crushed Aaliyah. That evening, Braden wrote something. He pulled Aaliyah Carter's address from Heritage's system, and he wrote a short, personal letter. Not a legal document, not a corporate apology, just something one person wrote to another. 2 paragraphs. I made a mistake. I understand what that mistake did to your father's name, and I'm sorry for it. He sent it. No reply came, but he had sent it, and that was what mattered to him. Aaliyah gets called back. That afternoon, Aaliyah's phone rang. Heritage Collectibles, the general manager. Ms. Carter, we'd like to see you as soon as possible. Aaliyah waited a beat. Why? A mistake was made, and we'd like to correct it. Aaliyah hung up, looked at the box, sitting on top of the shelf. If the time comes, give them to the right place. Something small, tired, but real crossed her face. She picked up the box, put on her jacket, walked out the door. Walking back through the doors of that room, everything looked the same. Same oak floors, same jerseys, same display cases. But the people were different. The way they looked at her was different. Braden was standing in the corner. When Aaliyah walked in, their eyes met, and Braden lowered his head. The general manager stepped forward, a formal apology, face to face, on the record. Then the sneakers were accepted into Heritage's spring auction as the most prestigious lot, Jordan and Aaliyah. But there was one more scene in this story. That same day, Heritage's general manager told Aaliyah one more thing. Mr. Jordan would like to see you, if that's all right. Aaliyah froze. When? Now. He's waiting downstairs. A small meeting room on Heritage's ground floor. 2 chairs, a table, and through the glass, Chicago's rooftops. When Jordan walked in, Aaliyah stood up. Please sit, said Jordan, gently. They both sat down. A long silence. Jordan started talking. Not directly. He told the story of that night first. The hallway, the confetti, the way Douglas had been organizing the bags, the small nod he'd given as a greeting. Aaliyah's eyes filled as she listened, but she didn't cry. She just listened. Your father, said Jordan, reminded me of something that night. A championship doesn't only belong to the people on the court, it belongs to everyone who was there. Aaliyah spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Did he ever tell you that? No, said Jordan. He never did, but he didn't need to tell me for me to remember it. Silence. Aaliyah placed the box on the table, opened it, took out the sneakers. Jordan's eyes went straight to the left side panel, to the signature he had written with his own hand 31 years ago. He reached out and touched it lightly with his fingertips, not like something might break if he let go. The opposite of that, like he was recognizing it. Yes, that's mine. That's that night. He looked up. Your father was a good man, he said. Aaliyah nodded. She was crying now, quietly. I know, she said. Auction day, April 2022. Heritage's annual spring auction. The room was full, screens glowing. And when that lot came up, Lot 47, Nike Air Jordan 6, June 12, 1991, NBA Finals, Game 5. Michael Jordan game worn. Signed. Authenticity, personally confirmed by Michael Jordan. The bidding opened at $75,000. Within the first 50 seconds, it had climbed to $200,000. 2.5 minutes later, it closed at $1.4 million. Aaliyah was sitting in the very back row of the room that day. In her hands, the yellow cardboard box. Empty now, but she was holding it. Chloe was sitting beside her. Neither of them said a word. They just sat there and watched the numbers rise on the screen. And when Aaliyah's eyes filled, not from sadness, the exact opposite, from the feeling that something had finally resolved, she pressed the box to her chest, just the way her father always had. In the days that followed, Braden Morrison left Heritage, quietly. 2 months later, the official statement said, mutual agreement. Chloe was brought on full-time in Heritage's authentication department, and a new protocol was put in place, small but meaningful. For historical pieces, social proof and chain of testimony analysis would now carry equal weight alongside UV light and signature measurement. Every rejection required sign-off from at least 2 experts, a small change. But in this industry, small changes produce big results. Because Aaliyah wasn't the only one. Before her, others had come to this table too, carrying real stories, only to run straight into a wall called protocol. And now that wall had a little more give to it. Aaliyah put a portion of the option proceeds toward her mother's care expenses. She covered her siblings' college tuition, and with what remained, she did something nobody expected. She made a donation to a small solidarity organization in Chicago, a group founded by former Bulls Arena staff, equipment handlers, cleaning crews, security teams, people who'd given years of their lives to the organization behind the scenes, and who had become invisible in retirement. On the donation form, she wrote a note, "In the name of Douglas Carter." The yellow box. That yellow cardboard box sits in Aaliyah's home now, in the corner, empty. But sometimes she opens it. There's nothing left inside, just that handwritten note, yellowed, edges slightly curled, but the letters still clear. Never sell them, but if the time comes, give them to the right place. Aaliyah folds it the same way every time. And every time she asks herself the same question, was it the right place, Dad? And that voice, the one that sounds so much like her father's, says the same thing every time. Yes, that was exactly it. This story is not about an auction house mistake. This is a story about invisible labor. Douglas Carter was inside that organization for 12 years. He hauled bags on every road trip. He stood ready behind the scenes on every playoff night. He was there for every finals, but not a single screen ever showed his name. That night, June 12, 1991, in the hallway of the Great Western Forum, one man saw him and held out a pair of sneakers. We made history tonight. These are a witness to that history. Keep them. Douglas kept that moment for 30 years. Didn't sell it. Didn't try to prove it to anyone. He just knew, and that was enough. But is there something in your life that hasn't been enough? A moment you know was real but nobody believed. A story you can't prove, but that's beyond question inside of you. And in that story, behind the scenes, quietly, without their name ever being said, who was standing beside you? Write it in the comments. Share your own story. Because who knows, maybe your story will remind someone else of their Douglas. On this channel, I tell a story like this every week. Sometimes it's about an athlete, sometimes a father, sometimes someone sitting in the back row whose name never got called. But they all tell the same thing, human dignity. How easily it gets trampled, and how easily it can be taken back. If this story moves something in you, give it a like, subscribe, hit the bell. Click on the channel's playlist and lose yourself in stories that are deep, emotional, and genuinely unforgettable. Hours of them. See you in the next one.